about the open source software that he uses called Impro-Visor. Thanks very much for coming. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a software tool that was actually developed here at Harvey Mudd over the past 7 years. And originally, the idea was to use it in a jazz improvisation course, but since we put it online and made it available to other users, we've gotten lots of other interest in using it in different ways, some of which weren't originally anticipated. So I'll tell you about how to use it today. It's not going to be a technical talk, which I usually am giving, but rather sort of an introduction with hopes that you yourselves might try to use it. So it's available on all platforms because it's coded in the Java language, Windows, Mac, and Linux. And this is the website. These slides will be available on the web. They are already, and I can direct you to them after the talk if you're interested. So example of an unexpected use recently informed of was at our Oregon National Laboratory. Some ecological researchers are using it to generate music from microbial data, and it's totally unexpected. But you can read about microbial bebop on the web if you go to this site. So today, as I mentioned, it's going to be mainly inviting you to become a user. Before I get into the meat of it, I wanted to acknowledge a lot of the developers who have helped with us over the years. So these are the people from Harvey Mudd, and then we also have quite a group from outside Harvey Mudd, largely through our NSF REU program that's held during the summertime, but also others as well. So what are the basic elements of music that we're going to talk about in this creativity talk? We have rhythm, which is like banging on a drum, harmony, playing on a keyboard or guitar, chords that accompany the melody, and for our uses, we'll also have a bass line, which is kind of the foundation of the piece. So the bass line is part of the chord structure, but it has kind of a unique, distinguished position. So an Impro-Visor, since it's a notation tool with playback type features, we only focus on a single melody line. So you would not use it to compose a symphony for many parts, lots of violins and so forth. It's really focused on small group playing. And it'll automatically generate the accompaniment in the form of percussion, drums, cymbals, and so forth, bass, and chords that can be played on piano or guitar or whatever chordal instrument is your pleasure. There are various styles of accompaniment, so you can have a swing style, a rock style, Latin style, and so forth. You can make your own styles even. And you don't need to know how to play any instrument in order to use it. So you could just start getting in, clicking things with the mouse, and eventually music will emerge of some kind, and then you can tweak that to suit your fancy. And the hope is that once you get into it, you will be motivated to learn more about music and playing instruments. So how is music produced electronically? On the computer, there are two primary vehicles. One is the audio, which is the thing that drives the speaker. And then there's a second vehicle that is called MIDI, which stands for Music Instrument Digital Interface. And it is a standard that was devised by instrument manufacturers probably 20 years ago, 30 years ago, something like that. And the idea is that with MIDI, you can connect together lots of different kinds of instruments and have them sort of plug and play together. So MIDI is ultimately rendered to audio, so you can hear it. Before that, it's just a stream of bits. And you can hear it on your computer with a MIDI synth, which is a piece of software, which most computers have sort of as part of their built-in operating system. Or you can generate, you can drive an external instrument, such as a digital keyboard or a variety of other kinds of things. So I didn't bring a keyboard with me that produces sound, but I do have a small one here that I'll use for demonstration. This can be used for input. So MIDI is good for input as well as output. So an Impro-Visor, all the sounds that are made start as MIDI, and then they are rendered in some way to audio. So if you use it and your sounds aren't sounding so great, particularly on Linux, this seems to be a problem. It's not our fault. It's the fault of the sound production module. So you can replace that with things that are better. Take my word for it. These are some of the other MIDI input instruments that you can get today, and quite a variety. They're not very expensive, so you can, and they're not toys. You can, for example, the one in the upper left corner is an instrument that can be played more or less like a recorder, which most school children are familiar with. And you can, from that, get all kinds of sounds. You can make it sound like a violin if you want to, or a bass, or whatever, because MIDI is able to transform its signals into any kind of instrument you want. So I'm going to walk through a little composing example using Impro-Visor. We'll start with some chords, which is going to generate the harmonic background. We'll add a melody, and then we'll kind of listen and enjoy what we are able to produce. So before I do that, a little bit of notation information. Sheet music, you've probably all seen. It generally comes with words. It comes with several staves that are aligned together. The top stave is usually the melody, and then the bottom staves are accompaniment with a chordal part and a bass line. We don't do sheet music. We only do what we call lead sheets. So lead sheet just has the melody, and it has the chord symbols across the top, same as in the sheet music, but it doesn't have the entire arrangement that you can see spelled out for you. That doesn't mean it can't generate the counterpart to that arrangement, but you just don't see it all. So it's really simplistic kind of interface by intent. So here's a lead sheet we'll start with, and this is the way things look when Impro-Visor opens up. You have your lead sheet, or at least part of it, on the screen. I couldn't get it all, fit it all on there. And this is, I assume everybody knows the Beatles from, I'm dating myself, but this is about as modern as I get when it comes to pop music. So here is the lead sheet for the tune, All My Loving. It's, I've excerpted a little bit to make it simpler, but it has the chords, it has the melody, and I'll just open Impro-Visor and you can see what that looks like. All right, so that's our lead sheet, and now let's just press the play button. We can play. So very basic melody. And so you can create that kind of thing by copying it from a lead sheet. Since it's for your own use, you're not violating any laws for personal use. And I would say it takes about maybe 5 to 10 minutes to enter that into Impro-Visor using a point and click method. There are other ways that you can enter information besides point and click. You can use a keyboard such as this, and you can do what's called step input, which means that you're doing one note at a time with equal spacing, or you can play in real time. Let's see, I want to undo what I just did. I'm not having good luck with it. There we go. So in real time, I'll just overwrite just take this away, and we'll just, let's see. Like that. And then you see, as you see, it's transcribed what I played. So That's a quicker way to enter a song, but of course there may be inaccuracies of what you play, and so you may have to go back and correct it if you do it that way. So sometimes it's safer to use the step input method. We'll come back to the original. And then a final way that I'll mention is that you can enter everything textually. So if I select a portion of the melody here, in this text entry part is the textual notation for that melody. So even though I've sort of reversed it coming from the lead sheet, you could also type it in that way. And with a little bit of experience, you can get really good at that, and things go really fast. So it's often faster than using a point and click method.
So, Bob,
yes.
You use it for like a diff thing, like you enter the music and then you play it and then you figure out where you messed up?
You could use it that way, sure. Mm-hmm. And I didn't actually demonstrate the point and click, but let's, to do that, let me start with a little exercise we'll do. So let's say that we want to produce what is called a contrafact. So contrafact means another melody over the same chord changes of an existing song. And contrafacts aren't illegal because chord changes per se cannot be copyrighted. So you can create all the melodies you want to over existing, and if you listen to rock music, you know that actually is done a lot because there are certain chord changes, the so-called 4-chord tunes that everybody and his brother has played or created. In the bebop era, which is where a lot of the contrafacts got it started, since the players were mostly interested in improvisation over the chord changes, they didn't really care so much about the original melody. So they would make up different melodies, and that way they wouldn't have to pay royalties to the original composer. And that was used very heavily during the bebop era. So let's create our own contrafact from this tune. So first thing we'll do is we'll erase the melody. So it's not, I mean, it's still out there in the file system, so you don't worry. And let's save this so that we don't destroy our original. So I'll call this all our loving today. Okay, so that nobody will be able to detect where this came from. And now, okay, so we could go and just sort of enter that and have our melody textually, but I want to show you how to do it with point and click. So let's. The idea is based on what I call punching in the notes. So you punch a note in a position on the staff, and you notice there are these vertical bars, and those indicate equal subdivisions for the beats in that measure. So by default, it's 4 subdivisions per measure, but that can be changed. So we just select any one of those and punch in a note. You'll notice I'm punching over the value of the previous note, so that's intentional. The idea is you don't want to have to waste your time entering, oh, this is an 8th note, this is a quarter note. You just want to go for it and enter your notes, just punching them in. If you make a mistake, you can go back and correct it. Just punch over the note that's there. So you can do that as much as you want. It's only a single melody line, so you're never going to end up with chords where you expected single notes to be for that reason. So it's a design feature. And let's see, if you wanted to do something like triplet pattern, which is 3 notes rather than 2, you just press 3, and that gives you 3 subdivisions, and then you can. My parallax is a little bit off today. There we go. Also, I should mention you can use the keypad to move the notes around. So it's not always hit and miss, is it? So let's see how that melody sounds. not too bad, defensible. And so let's just continue a little bit. So I'm going to move the cursor to here. And by the way, you notice when I click in the notes, you hear the chord being played behind it. So that's also gives you an indication of what it's going to sound like. So anytime I want to play the little segment that I have just entered, I just select that segment. And if you want to play it from that segment and continue on to the end, you just hold the return key and it plays it all the way to the end until you tell it to stop. Feel free to interrupt if you have questions about anything I'm saying. So that could be the basis of a contrafact tune that then we could try to publish or record or whatever. Okay, so since it's a little bit off the cuff, I'm not proposing that would be the real thing. You can go back and edit. So once you have something like that, then you can save it. And so we'll just say, I think we already saved it once, so just save it again. What else can you do at this point? So you can continue filling out the whole tune. You could also do something like, suppose you wanted to improvise on this tune. So there are various ways you can do that. One is just, as I was doing before, just play, have the background accompany you, and then you play in the foreground, and it was recorded as you saw. Another way that is common in jazz is to do what we call trading, where the one instrument will play for, say, 4 bars, and then another instrument will play for, you play 4 and it'll play 4, that kind of a thing. So let me open a lead sheet that is like this but doesn't have the little emptiness at the beginning. Just set up specifically for trading. And what we'll do is we'll press this improvise button, and it's set up to trade 4 measures. So it'll play 4 and then I'll play 4 on the keyboard, and we'll go back and forth in that way. Okay, and it's going around for another, of course, so that will continue indefinitely. And then when we're done with that, we can actually review everything that's been played by essentially going backward and seeing what was there. And if we wanted to capture any of that for posterity, we could save it and then use it for future. So the improvisation that it was doing is generated on the fly. And we use a concept called grammars to do that. So grammar is a computer science idea that is essentially in the same way that you would think of a grammar as defining a spoken language, you can have a grammar that defines a musical language. And in our case, what we do is we use the grammar to generate the textual form, and then that is rendered as music in Impro-Visor. And there's also, with the tool, there's a device for learning grammars. So in the grammar menu, we have a number of different grammars, and let's see, some of them correspond to specific artists. We've taken transcriptions of those artists and entered them, and then we press a button essentially and say learn a grammar for this artist, and then it will be able to play things that are similar to what that artist played in his or her solo. So I'll just give you an idea of how that goes. This is a saxophonist named Jimmy Heath. I don't think he ever played rock, so this may be totally out of character. So that's Jimmy Heath. If we wanted something that was not quite as busy as that, we could take this Miles Davis grammar, which was based on transcription of rather sparse melodic solos rather than dense ones, as you just heard, and then we get something quite different. Now, I don't think either of those guys did ever play the Beatles, but Miles Davis definitely played Michael Jackson, so it would not have been out of the question. Let's see. What about style? Supposing we might have done this, so I happen to have a contrafact already worked out here that I did earlier. And suppose we got tired of that style, so we want to change to a different style. So we can go in here in the style menu and say, well, let's try that as a Latin tune rather than a rock. See if it sounds better. Or we could let's try it as a swing tune. So in a swing tune, the difference is that whereas in Latin and most rock, the eighth notes are actually rendered as even durations. In swing, you have uneven durations. The first eighth note will be longer. The second eighth note will be shorter. So the typical sound is on the cymbal, that kind of a sound. And the accompaniment, of course, has to follow suit as well as the melody. So let's try this as a swing tune. So here's one example. So it gives you an idea of different styles that you can try. And you can also make up your own styles. We have a style editor, which looks like a spreadsheet. And what's in it is, so let's get a style with a little more busyness to it. Each style is represented as a set of patterns, and those patterns are selected probabilistically to. That's interesting. That's not something happened. I think I destroyed that. I destroyed that file. I was looking for something busier. Each of the patterns are chosen probabilistically, so you can make some patterns used more heavily than others. As the rendering of the background takes place. Let's try this one. That's better. And so in the styles we have patterns for the bass. We have patterns for the chords. And we have patterns for the various percussion instruments. So this is percussion played individually. And then you can hear them all in concert by, so even though they sound sort of rinky one at a time, when you put them together, can be a fairly sophisticated pattern. And there's also a piano roll feature that, if I can remember how to use it, nope, that's not it. Let's see. I'm forgetting how to use my own tool. Let's see. I think I'll just cheat and use the menu here. You stop scrolling. Here we go. So the piano roll editor can be used to give you a visual indication of when the various percussion instruments are going to be struck and so on. You can use that to, you can edit these things and save them as your patterns. Then to match that, we also have a style learning feature. So similar to the grammar learning feature for melody, we can say take a MIDI transcription of some style and then learn some rules from that transcription. So it then would give you a style that you could then use over any tune essentially. And that's kind of works. It's still got some problems, but it's a pretty handy tool actually, because a lot of these styles that we have here were taken from that particular device. So let's see, are there any questions? Got a few more things I can mention here on the slides. Oh, if you wanted to, while you're playing, if you wanted to emphasize or de-emphasize certain notes, you can open this mixer panel and then change the volume of the chords, the bass, the drums, the melody with respect to each other. You can mute any of those if you just wanted to hear one. You can choose different MIDI instruments. Thanks to MIDI, we can just using a menu, we can click in different instruments. I like the vibraphone melody for the Macintosh built-in sounds because the horns and things like that sound pretty bad most of the time. But you can also use third-party software such as Aria, which is purchasable for about $100, I think, and that will give you some really nice orchestral sounds and instrumental sounds. Style choices, mentioned that. So we went through this. In our user group, we have what I call the imaginary book, which is a book of over 2,500 songs, chord changes to the song. So you can also enter your own chords, of course, but the imaginary book has a lot of things that you would have heard, and you can use those. So I think this is what we did. If you're interested in learning about music theory, we have what is called the advice feature. And the idea there is that, let's say I wanted to create a melody over these two chords, for example, but I didn't really have any theoretical basis on which to base that melody. So I can open the advice, and this will tell me, like I might not even know what is that chord, what are the notes in it. So we can say, play the chord, that's the chord, or I can ask things like, what are some tones that go with that chord but are not actually in the chord? We call those color tones. So those show up as green rather than black on the staff. I can say, what are some scales that you might use with that chord? So a common one for pop music is the Dorian scale. Or you could also get fancier and go to like augmented scale, maybe. It's a little more esoteric. Has more notes that are not in the chord itself. So you see some red there, and red means that you're clashing with the chord, but sometimes you want to do that intentionally. And blue is what we call an approach tone. It's not in the chord, but it is a half step away from something in the chord, so it is kind of sliding into the chord tone. And so on. So there's a wide variety of different scales that you can learn about. We also have something called cells. So cell is a short melodic phrase, usually composed of eighth notes, and something like that. So there's tons of those you can sample. And this little, these slashes here represent the sort of the shape of the melody. So going up and then down, or up, down, up, or various things like that. And they can get fairly complex. There's even some that are borrowed from other musicians. Idioms are jazz, sort of like an extension of cells that are kind of things that are commonly found in jazz. You might think of them as cliches. And they're actually based on two chords rather than, I'm sorry, they're still based, it's licks that are based on two chords. So licks are even more complex. And some jazz musicians do their improvisation by having large repertoires of licks that they can pull out on demand. When they hear a particular thing coming up, they can play that lick. So in a way, it's not true improvisation at the note-by-note level. It's more like at the phrase level, but still would qualify as improvisation. And the last thing you can do is quotes. You can take bits from other songs. Common quotes that are used by jazz musicians. And you can add to your own stuff to this repertoire. So you can add stuff, edit it, and so forth. I think that's mostly what I was hoping to say today. Let's see. Oh, there's a help, so you can go to the pull-down menus, and lots of the edit operations have shortcuts, a little bit more explanation in the documentation here. I showed you how to make styles. You can also learn about chord voicings, which are when the chord is played, it's not typically stacked in like that in what is called root position, but rather would be revoiced something like that to make it sound a little bit more orchestral. And so with the chord voicings window open, you can see what the piano is doing with respect to chord. The blue note here represents the bass note, which is not actually being played on the chord instrument. And I showed you trading. So I think that's mostly what I want to go over. There's a lot of other features, but I don't want to get into too much sort of esoteric territory today. Any questions? Yes?
So for a person who wants to hook up and get going,
yes.
using a MIDI controller like
you don't need that to get started. That's just if you want to play along with it, or.
So if you did want to use a MIDI controller,
yes.
Is there a program? Do you have to program the keys, sync it with the application so it knows?
Well, so there's the MIDI interface is standardized. So this is a USB, and so it's just a USB connector. If you have a more older keyboard, they come with this kind of connector, which is a 5-pin connector, and so you get this end on one end and the USB on the other end to connect to your computer. But you don't have to do anything extra; it's pretty much already there. So, and you can also get, as I mentioned, third-party programs that will go directly from MIDI to sound rendering on the computer, and those use sound samples. So they take, for example, if you wanted to sample a Steinway, they have a Steinway sound, and your piano is going to sound a lot better with that kind of a device. But it's also very turnkey. It's not even USB. It's just connected in the software itself, so you don't have to connect anything. But this is handy for entering notes. I usually keep this in front of my regular keyboard on the desktop, then I can just enter stuff in that way. It goes really fast.
Can you use Impro-Visor with other music software like GarageBand or something?
Yeah, it's a good question. You can, in two ways you can. So you can export MIDI. So the MIDI file, the MIDI that you create can be exported as a file, and then a lot of music programs will be able to read MIDI, and then you can work with it in those. It also exports something called MusicXML, which is XML specialized to music notation. And increasingly, I would say most notation systems import that. So the common ones would be Sibelius is the sort of the big kahuna, and then you have I'm sorry, not Sibelius. What am I thinking of? Finale is the big kahuna. Sibelius is sort of the second kahuna, which is in danger of going out of business. So you should get a copy. There's also something called MuseScore, which is a rival, a free open source rival to those programs, and it will allow you to do orchestral things. And maybe Bill knows a few more that you like to use.
Notation program.
Yeah.
It's pretty much it.
Yeah. And there's other things that are sort of competitors to this, like Band in a Box, which can do some of the same background generation with lots more instruments and things. And we're not really trying to compete with them because ours is designed as an educational tool primarily. We're not trying to be a one-man band kind of thing. Some people try to use Band in a Box as like street musician or something. But, and actually some people use this for that too. So, but that's not the main intent. It's just a secondary. Yes?
Earlier you selected a section just to play that. Can you cycle that section over and over again?
Yes, you can loop that. So if I wanted to loop this part, I just turn looping on. Okay, that's a minor variant on, so let's change this note. Sorry, looping is still on. Don't want to do that. Oh, we also have something called rectification. If you create a line that's sort of totally messed up, like a lot of red notes, doesn't really fit with the chord, you just press a button and it brings it into line with the chord. So it'll make you look better, much better than you really are. But yeah, you can loop. So let's say just loop this section and play along with it, for example. It's a good way to practice certain sections of a tune without having to go over the whole tune each time.
Yeah, I heard about that story on NPR actually.
Really?
Yeah.
On the
I'm
air?
sure,
Wow.
yeah. I had no idea that he was improviser for that.
Was that this week or?
It was recently.
Okay.
Like within the last 2 weeks or so. I'll have to
Interesting.
find it for you.
Yeah, we should get more press out of it maybe.
Yeah.
But
What story is that?
it's a story about some scientists at Argonne National Laboratory using this to generate music from microbial data and ecological data. They don't actually mention improviser though in their blurb. So but he sent me a message saying, yeah, we use this.
That's very cool. Are you still doing any development? With
Yeah, oh yes, development is going on still. And during the academic year, it's like trying to fit it in the cracks.
Is that Java based?
It's all Java based. Mm-hmm.
So, Bob, I remember many years ago, Bob Sedgwick at Princeton, who's written all these algorithm books, he was doing a project where, for teaching, he would generate music from the students' program.
Ah.
And listening to it would help you figure out whether you've got a bug in the program.
Ah, interesting.
Because the behavior would kind of diverge.
So the dynamic execution of the program. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
we.
know how far he pushed it, but I remember just hearing a talk of his many years ago.
Right.
This was, like before the MIDI days or maybe the early MIDI days.
Yeah. We used to put a FM radio on the top of the computer and listen to, cycle through the program. And people, I'm sure somebody tried to make music with that too.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming.